morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk a lot about my experience in Korea. Talk about a couple of things that I did right, and then a couple of things I didn't do right. Because I think, that's probably the most annoying thing I hear preaching is when somebody presents themselves like a hero. Because it just, I don't know why, it just annoys me. It's like, you're not perfect either. But anyway, so the title of the sermon is the Incarnational Missionary. But if we could have a word of prayer first. Father in heaven, I pray that you'd have mercy on me and on the congregation, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among the people with unclean lips. And I just pray that you'd watch over all of us with your Holy Spirit and help us to learn together and be convicted by your Spirit. We pray in the name of Jesus, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So the title, The Incarnational Missionary, was actually this name of a little pamphlet that they gave everybody in the North American division who was going to be a missionary. You were required to read it, and you had to take a little quiz on it. And I was really disturbed because the pamphlet made a huge impact on me, and it set the tone for my entire time in South Korea. I was in South Korea from 2008 until 2009. And I still don't know who invited me to go there. I got a letter with no sender. It was mailed to me, and it was a magazine clipping of the SDA school in Korea. It says, "Come to Korea, come to Korea, come to Korea." And they had a Korean woman wearing a hanbok, which is like Korean traditional like style of dress for like the royalty and stuff. And I still don't know who sent it to me, but I remember like I just got rejected from grad school, and then I was like, man, do I want to get more debt in grad school? Like I'd have to pay for it all myself because I applied for an assistantship. I got in, but I didn't get a scholarship. So I was like, man, I'm going to have to pay for more schooling. I don't want to get into more debts. But then while I was thinking about that, I got this letter, and it said, "Come to Korea, come to Korea, come to Korea." And I don't know, I still to this day don't know who sent it to me. And I think the postmark was Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. I still don't, it makes even less sense. I still don't, I wish I knew who sent it. But anyway, I was like, man, because it's like I'd be able to pay off some of my student loans. I'd be able to be a missionary. It's like that kind of beats. It's like I don't have good excuses to not go, and I always wanted to be able to be a missionary in Asia. So, but anyway, so we had to read this little pamphlet, and it made a huge impact on me. I'll tell you more about it. But I was disturbed when I got there. I talked to some of the other missionaries. I said, "Man, what did you think about that pamphlet there?" "Oh yeah, that thing. Yeah, I just filled out the quiz, and I was like, how did this not like fundamentally like rock your theological world, But anyway, so because I for 1 year I lived as a missionary English teacher. I lived on the literal opposite side of the world. So every time you guys are going to sleep, they're waking up, and every time they're going to sleep, you're waking up. I was saying goodbye to my family for a whole year. Especially the other thing that was terrifying about living in South Korea was, over there, my family was like, you need to get back. They were doing those nuclear missile tests and nuclear bomb tests and everything. And, you'd see the news and it'd say, North Korea issued another statement that they would reduce the South Peninsula to a sea of fire and ash. And I'm like another statement? So I talked to my students. And I was freaking out. My family's freaking out. They're like, "Oh, Billy, you got to come home. It's dangerous there. That guy's a madman." And I talked to my students, and they go, there he goes again." And then my student told me, she said, "Teacher, if you die in a nuclear blast, that is destiny. There's nothing you can do about it. So you may as well live your life." And I remember thinking, that's oddly comforting. There isn't anything I can do at this point if I get blown up in a nuclear blast. But anyway, so the pamphlet talked about how Jesus, he lived among us, and he came to earth and he fully identified with us. He took on a human form. He spoke a human language. He adopted a human culture. He ate human food. He wore human clothing, and he lived just like the people of his day were living. And the pamphlet said that Jesus did that for 33 years before he began his ministry, and by fully identifying with us, he saw life through our eyes, and he got a very personal feel for what it was like to be like us. So likewise, if you're going to be a prepared missionary, you should take the same approach when you go to a foreign place. You should, are you prepared to live in the housing that they live in? That was very difficult at the time, because in South Korea, they don't largely, by and large, do not have dryers. They don't have dryers. They think like that's really wasteful. Every apartment has an east-facing window and a west-facing window, and so there's a drying room in the east of the house, and there's a drying room in the west of the house. So like you can hang your wet clothes on these racks. Everyone's got these racks and stuff. And for those of you who grew up with a clothesline, you know what it's like. Clothes aren't as soft and flexible when they've been drying on a rack. It feels like kind of like you're wearing cardboard at the beginning of the day. That was annoying, but I try to never complain about it. It's like, wow, this is so eco-friendly. But are you prepared to speak their language? I tried very hard to learn Korean before I went, and then I brought books with me, and I was trying very hard to like learn it as fast as I could. And it was disturbing to me that there were missionaries in Korea who'd been there for like 5 years and still didn't know left and right. Wow. in a taxi cab. You can't say so you guys are opposite. 왼쪽, 오른쪽. You can't say left and right. Why can't? How long have you been here? And you're still like a gorilla in the taxi. No. It made me feel like, man, you are disrespectful. Like you don't respect these people. You're not trying to blend in, But and I got very good at taxi cab Korean. And the difficulty. So like in Korea, there's a hierarchy, right? So you can listen to a conversation and know within 2 sentences who's older than who outranks who, because the verb at the end tells you how respectful they're being. So I would use polite, say, Sahantown 아파트 알아요? Do you know where Sahantown apartments are? And he'd go, 알았습니까? I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. I used regular polite. I had to use polite and also you're older than me. That's the only difference between 알아요 is, do you know this place? And 알았습니까 is, I'm recognizing that you're a lot older than me and I'm trying to be polite to you. So but certain cab drivers would correct me and be like, you're still being rude, So I had to, there's a lot of culture that you had to learn there. And were you prepared to eat their food? So, the food, when you go to another place, there's just food you miss. Like there were no Taco Bells there. For whatever reason, Taco Bell, and there was one Mexican restaurant that was run by 2 Canadians that were married to Korean women. It was called the Holy Grill. It was one place in a city of 3 million people that you could get a taco. So it was like finding the Holy Grail. You're like, oh, I found the Holy Grill. I could get a taco. Anyway, so, but imagine, and they talked about this in the pamphlet, they said, imagine what it would feel like if Jesus came to earth and he didn't bother to speak with us directly. He brought an angel with him, and he would talk to the angel. I don't know what they're saying. Can you tell them this? And then the angel would talk to us, and then we would be like, what's he saying? Well, he's saying this, and then you have to talk to the angel, and then the angel translates for him. It's like, man, why doesn't he speak what we speak? He doesn't want to bother with that. That's not. He doesn't speak that language in heaven, Or imagine if if he did nothing to adopt our culture, Imagine if you read John 13, and rather than washing the disciples' feet, he just complained about how dirty their feet were, and he said, back where I'm from, the roads are made of gold, and you can walk barefoot without becoming filthy like this. Like, what's wrong with you all? Have you heard of gold? It would make nicer roads and all this dusty stuff you have all over the place. There's dirt everywhere. Oh, that's right. You can't do that because you're too poor. So imagine if Jesus refused to eat our food. The disciples sit down for Passover, and while they ate, an angel brought him food that he imported from heaven and fed him that food. And then, one of the disciples offered him some lamb and unleavened bread, and Jesus goes, oh, I don't eat that in heaven. That's gross. He made foods. No, thank you. Jesus ate, he ate our food. If you think about it, even though it's not, we don't live in Palestine in ancient days, but the pamphlet talked about a lot of these ideas, and they said, you have to adopt this mindset. And Paul had this experience too. We read in the scripture reading, 1 Corinthians 9:20. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, not being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. To the weak I became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So Paul was not under the Jewish law. He was not bound to keep these ceremonial provisions, but there were some Jews that it would be impossible to minister to them if you were not following those Jewish laws. So I don't know if a lot of people skip over this verse, but if you read Acts 16 in verse 3, what did Paul do to Timothy? He circumcised him. Think about dedication. Think about dedication. You were dedicated to reaching a group of people. You're like, these people are going to ask if you're circumcised, and if you answer no, we're done. They will shut their doors to us, and we're not even going to be able to sit to them and talk to them about Jesus. We're going to have to just not go at all, because Timothy was his mother was Jewish, his dad wasn't, if I'm not mistaken. Think about the dedication. Like you're in ministry with someone, you're like, all right, time to perform a surgical procedure, or we're not going to be able to get anybody into the door, So I pondered this, a lot of this while I was reading this. It was just a little pamphlet. It was such a small pamphlet, maybe 15 pages or something like that. But I bought a book, Let's Speak Korean. I started studying the language. This is before I went. I bought another book called Ugly Americans, Ugly Koreans, that talked about cultural differences. There was a section in the book, I'll never forget this. There's a little girl, and there's a guy at a restaurant eating noodles. And there's a girl pointing at her. She's pulling on her mom's skirt. And she says, 엄마, 외국인 젓가락 사용한다. And it's, Mom, look, the foreigners eating with chopsticks. And they said in the book that, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb, and people will sometimes point at you. Children especially will be like, oh my gosh, look at that. There's a foreigner. 외국인 is foreigner. I heard that all the time when I was out in public. People would point, oh, there's a foreigner. So amazingly, one day, I was sitting in a kimbap Chungguk. Kimbap is like a sushi, and Chungguk means heaven. So the restaurant name was like Kimbap Chungguk. It's like the Korean McDonald's. I always told my students, oh, I love Kimbap Chungguk. And they were like, oh, teacher, that's not good quality food. That's not. They were thinking, it'd be like, McDonald's is my favorite. I love it. People are like, there's some better foods than that. You can get kimbap some other place. It's a higher quality. But anyway, there was a little girl. She was tugging on her mom's dress, and she was pointing at her. 엄마, 외국인 젓가락 사용한다. Mom, look, there's a foreigner. He's using chopsticks. So I read a book called Korea Unmasked, and that was really helpful because it showed the history of Korean culture, the history between Korean North and South, and also the difference between China and Japan. And I thought I was prepared because I read all these books, but books are books. They're not the real world. So I was prepared. But I remember there was one thing that was amazing, because I really tried to implement this pamphlet as much as I could. There was one time I had to get a haircut, and there were so many things that you fight when you're a missionary, because you just don't want to adopt the culture. There's certain things about the culture that you don't like haircut. Okay, I wanted to get a normal haircut where it tapers and it gets a little bit shorter, to the edge. You know what I'm talking about. But over there, the hair would just go down, and then they just cut it straight across. So that it was like the same length here all the way down, and then it would cut across. And oh my gosh, I did not want my hair like that. I wanted it to be tapered. And I begged the barber. I begged him, and I said, please, can you do this? I'm speaking through a translator because I couldn't. Some of the words I couldn't remember, so I just had to say, when I would order an egg, I wanted them to flip the egg, but I kept forgetting the word for flip. So I just had to say, 이렇게, like this. 이렇게, and I just had to gesture. They're like, oh, okay. And then they get on the 이렇게. Okay, they want the egg to be like this. I was like, yes, because sometimes some restaurants would only cook the egg on one side, and I hated that. I don't like egg being runny on top. But anyway, so I'm trying to use Korean, and you would learn certain words, and certain words I just couldn't remember. But there was a group of teachers that came up to my wife at the time, and I were both teachers there, and they said, uh, they said, no other teachers have done what you've done. I said, what? Like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you actually, we had a Vespers program that we did every Friday, and the teachers would always get dinner together. And whenever we were on duty, we would sit down and eat dinner with them. And it was all Korean food, and some of it was really good, and then some of it was a little bit strange. You just got used to it. But they said, you guys are the only teachers who ever sat down and ate our food. They said the other teachers maybe did it one time, and they were like, and they make faces, and they're like, this is too spicy, or this is too weird, or this is too much vinegar, or whatever. I thought, man, but you could tell, like, it really makes an impact on people when you try your best to meet them at their level and eat their food. And it just made me sad, but I don't want to give myself too much credit because I'm a very adventurous person. I like trying new things. So I know for people that are not, that's a very difficult thing. But, you get used to certain foods. In Korean culture, refusing food is like a terrible insult because if you think about it, like, up until the 1980s, it was a third world country. Before the miracle of the Han River, Park Chung-hee, the president, said, we're not going to be a third world country anymore. We're going to start, instituting some economic reforms. And so it went from being a third world country to being a first world country in 30 years. Wow. That's why they call it the miracle of the Han River. The Han River became an industrial complex, and they just created wealth out of thin air. It was, really kind of incredible. So there are people, that are like the baby boomers age over there who lived in some pretty impoverished areas, like in the 70s, it could be pretty bad. So offering someone food is like, I'm sharing my limited resources with you. I'm showing you that I value you just as much as, I want you to value me. So if you didn't accept their food, that was really rude. And so, some of the teachers did not get that. It was too hard to eat food that they were not familiar with. Think about this. This is kind of crazy to think about, but you can go to a KFC in Korea and there are no mashed potatoes. There are no mashed potatoes because they think of, there's no food in Korea that's like mashed potatoes. It's like a mushy, sloppy thing. There's nothing like it. So over there, they pair fried chicken with, it's called mul kimchi. It's like a white radish that they dice into cubes. They put in vinegar. And to this day, whenever I'm eating fried chicken, I'm like, man, I could go for some radish right now. But you can't buy it anywhere here. You can buy kimchi, but you can't buy, mul kimchi is a special type that we would get from this restaurant called Hoshigi's Chicken. And whenever I said that was my favorite restaurant, they always laugh because Hoshik is a name in Korean that's like Billy Bob. So it was like Billy Bob's Chicken, but they thought that was really funny because they said, oh, man, that name is just such an old, country bumpkin name. But anyway, adapting to the food and I tried to see both sides. One time, I remember, I'll tell you the story. I was sitting with my students, and they're all complaining about one of the teachers. They're like, this teacher is awful. He does not respect our culture. He doesn't like Korean culture. He doesn't respect us. He won't eat our food, and whenever he does, he makes faces. And I said, hold on now, because this guy was my friend, so I was trying to go to bat for him. So I'm I'm caught in the middle between these two groups, because they were felt very adamant and felt very disrespected. And I said, hold on now. I know how after Nikki's, you all went over to Pastor's house, and his wife made you all spicy noodles. And they go, oh, how did you know that? I said, well, a little birdie told me. And now, to give you some backstory, Nikki was a military wife of one of the soldiers on the American Army base, and she prepared this wonderful potluck. There was macaroni salad and potato salad and hot dogs, and the best of all, there was a American pear. Okay, you don't know that pears here are, not in Korea, but you could never find. I was like, man, I haven't seen a pear in 9 months. I had Korean pears, but not a green one. But I watched the Koreans. I was watching, how are they going to like noodle salad? And knowing what I knew about mashed potatoes in KFC, I was like, what are they going to do? And I noticed on their plates, there was a single scoop of each thing, one spoon. And even that, they couldn't eat. And then very, very quietly, they found their ways into the garbage can, and then the secret spicy noodles were prepared at Pastor's house. And my student looked at me, because she's horrified that I knew about them going to Pastor's house, because they tasted it, didn't like it, went to pastor's house. They fixed up some spicy noodles. And she says, oh, but Bill, this is what the student said. She was the ringleader of the group of complainers. She says, you don't understand. Our food is delicious, and your food is disgusting. I laughed and I laughed. And I said, don't you think that this teacher feels the same about his own food? Don't you think he misses the food in South Africa? Don't you think that nothing like this food is nothing like the food that he has back home? Don't you think that he might miss his home food that his mom would cook for him? And then they all went, oh, they're whispering in Korean. They're like, oh, I see. Oh, so his food is delicious to him, and our food is disgusting to him. And I was like, yeah, probably, and they're like, oh, they hadn't, you tell they hadn't thought about it. So they kind of translated the aha moment. But there were some times that, like I said, there's some times that it worked, but then there are also times that I felt really embarrassed for myself looking back on it. Like I shared a classroom with a woman named she chose an English name, Sophie. And our schedule was very tight. Sometimes there were 5 minutes between classes. So you had to get out of there and be ready to leave, get all your students out. Anyway, I heard from my wife at the time, who heard it from Jesper, who heard it from Mijung, who heard it from Sophie, that she really didn't like me leaving my notes on the board, and she wishes I would have erased it because it eats into her class time. And I saw Sophie twice that day. And she smiled at me and she said hello and all these other things, but this whole thing just kept secret, and then talked to this person, talked to that person, talked to that person to get it back to me. And they told them, hey, can you talk to the so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I'll talk to so-and-so. Okay, can you talk to the so-and-so and then talk to him? Can you get this back to him? I was so mad. I felt doesn't she realize I'm a considerate person? If she just asked me, I would have done that. Does she realize that she could have just eliminated letting 3 people know about my problem and my shortcomings? Does she have to go and tell every single person? Because I'm looking at it like gossip. This is like gossip. This is like dishonesty. So I go to Sophie the next day and I said, hey, my wife told me that Jesper told her, that Mijung told her, that you told Mijung that you're really annoyed with me about leaving my writings on the board. Next time, can you just tell me? And she just turned white as a ghost. And because in Korean, there's a word called kibun. It's very difficult to translate, but it means kind of a mood or atmosphere. And you can hurt someone's kibun, by embarrassing them and causing them to lose face. So Sophie was trying to help me avoid an uncomfortable situation at work and avoid me losing face, or maybe someone would hear me because there's always people. So if she's telling me, hey, I need you to clean this marker board off, and then she does that in front of people, then there's no way to do it quietly. Then it's going to embarrass me, and it's going to make me seem like she's my boss and can order me around. And it was just an uncomfortable situation she just wanted to avoid. And that's a typical Korean way. They call it the S curve, because it goes this way and that way and this way. So she's trying to do a favor for me, and how was it rewarded? It was by me walking all over her kibun in the name of, I'm going to clear the air. I'm going to be honest, because I'm thinking, I'm doing it better. So often we can be so convinced that our way is right that we don't see what the person is trying to say or do for us at all. And we got to get those blinders off. But one of the more controversial things, I want to tell you this story, and then I'll try to end. There's a practice of, and it doesn't translate so well, but it's called ancestor worship, okay? My friend Sangjun invited me over to his house. It's like the Korean word, the practice is called chadye. It's during the Lunar New Year, they all prepare some different types of foods, and then they open a window and they put a spoon straight up and down. So if you're ever eating with people from Japan or Korea, don't stick your fork or food directly straight up and down. That's for funerals only, and for this special ceremony. And they open a window, and then they leave that food out of whatever their family member's favorite food was that had died, and they leave it for them, and they have a moment of silence, and they bow. And so it's a very solemn experience. The mood was very quiet. It was like a funeral. I remember Daria at the time, she's like, hey, can I get a picture of you and your family? And they were like, this is weird. They said, we don't take pictures at this holiday. The holiday was just very different. It was like a funeral holiday. because they'd have pictures of their loved ones and everything like that. So after the ceremony, everybody's eating and talking and laughing. Then it got a little bit more lighthearted, but I felt like very privileged that my friend allowed me to participate in that ceremony, because there's only family. It's like you don't go over to your friends' houses to celebrate this kind of thing. And there was a student that summer who wanted to get baptized, and he was worried because he was told by the leaders that participating in that ceremony was wrong, because you're not supposed to worship your elders. And it made me sad, because the word for worship that's used in the Bible, like, bowing in Western culture is a sign of, like, I'm showing that you're better than me, and like I'm like recognizing your power and your authority over me. But like over there, bowing is just a normal greeting. Like, how like parents will grab their kids' hands and be like, say hello. I had like a teacher. She had her son there. He was like 5 or 6 years old. She grabbed a hold of his head and was like, bow to teacher, and just it was like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like. But like that's their equivalent of, like, because and it made me look at parents like making their kids wave in a whole new way. It's like, hey, wait, say hello. But the word, and I remember talking with a Korean friend. I said, that word, when you say, you're bowing, like what word do you use? And I said, he gave me the Korean word, and I can't quite remember it at the time. I said, is that the same word for in church? And he said, what? No, like it's just like, it means like respect. So it's like a sign of respect. So. It's just it gave me a very different picture of like what these ceremonies meant for the people that were in it. And it makes me think about, there's that song, The Sound of Silence, where it says, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening. There's sometimes, how many difficulties do we have from people just not understanding each other? And I hope that you can take that away from this, because I know when I returned home, I realized that I did not make as much effort to know my loved ones, really to understand them and understand things from their perspective. You think about, like, are you an incarnational missionary to your family? Have you taken on their way of life? If they invite you to something and you're like, well, that's not my cup of tea. I don't go to football games. I think that's stupid. So are you doing that? I was too busy trying to save my family and evangelize to them, and I did not spend the time getting to know, what made them tick, how they thought, what was important to them, what was difficult for them. Did I follow in the footsteps of Jesus and do my best to empathize with them? I'm doing better now, but as you can see, it's a growth process. It takes a long time to know someone, and it sounds cheesy, but it's true. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Like, how much of my marriage did I ruin by not understanding my spouse, by not being an incarnational missionary there? How much book learning can help the people you love feel known and seen? Just because you know about them does not mean you actually know them. So, think of the people you love, and, how much work have you put into getting into their shoes? I'm not saying you have to spend 33 years like Jesus, but Jesus spent 33 years among us before he started preaching. So that should tell us something about how much time have you really spent with the people you love before you start preaching to them, and really understanding them. Because it's funny, it's not funny, it's sad. Probably one of the most painful things is not being known or seen. That is the hell of abandonment. If you think of like Matthew 7:23, what did Jesus say to the wicked? He says, "Depart from me, I never knew you." That's the ultimate abandonment by God, that, like, I don't know you. The opposite of this, what did Jesus pray for his disciples? In John 17, verse 3, and this is eternal life, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. And how does God think about his children? Deuteronomy 32:10, when he's talking about Jacob, he says, he found him in the desert land and in the waste howling wilderness. He led him about, he instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. This apple of his eye, I don't know if you know this, this phrase was just an English phrase. And it's because the apple is like dark, dark fruit, and it's like, it's round like the pupil of your eye. The translators were looking at this passage, and they're like, I really don't know how to translate it. They're talking about the pupil. And so I guess that, we'll just put apple of his eye, even though there's not like a word apple there. But the and this is kind of disputed. It's not totally settled, but there's some translators who believe that the word apple of his eye that gets translated that way is the little man of the eye. So I don't know if you've ever looked into somebody's eye and you get real close. What do you see in the? Yeah, I'm crushing your head. But if you get real close to someone, real close, you can see a little outline of yourself in their eye. That's the little man of the eye. But that's how God thinks of us. God knows us better than He knows ourselves, and He showed us the example of how to show people that you can identify with them, that you can understand them. So that's my prayer for myself, and I wish that I was better at it. I really do. That I could be better at knowing people instead of knowing about them, because a lot of that is just like me back in Korea reading these books. Like, well, I'll just read these books and then I'll know about Korea. It's like, well, do you really know about Korea? Do you really know Korea? After having lived there, it's a very different experience. So that's my prayer for myself and also for all of you, that we can become a kind of incarnational missionary to the people that we love, just like the kind of missionary that Christ was, and that we make the effort to see and help people to feel seen and to feel known by us. That's my prayer for all of you. If we could bow our heads. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for the effort you made to know us, that you came down and identified with us, that you lived among us, and that you did your best to fully identify with us. And I pray, Lord, that you be with all of our friends and loved ones. There might be some people that we have damaged relationships with. We've alienated ourselves from them. Ways that maybe we were in pain for not being known, and so we cause more feelings of being unknown. And I just pray that you'd help us to be like you, and that we become an incarnational missionary, and that we would be able to be like your Son Jesus. For I know, and I pray this in His name. For His is the power and the kingdom and the glory forever and ever. Amen.